When you stop participating in chaos, some relationships begin to fade. Not because you became cold, but because you became calm. And here's what nobody tells you about that. It's going to feel like you did something wrong. It's going to feel like loneliness, like a room that used to be full of noise, and now it's just quiet. And you're standing in the middle of it, wondering, is this healing? Or did I just lose everything? Today, we're going to talk about why peace feels like grief before it feels like freedom. And we're going to be honest about it, not just the Instagram quote version, the real version, the uncomfortable one. Because if you're in the middle of this right now, I don't want you to think something is broken in you. Something is actually working. Think of it this way. If you've been living next to a highway your whole life, you stop hearing the traffic. It becomes background. It becomes normal. But the moment you move somewhere quiet, suddenly you hear everything. The smallest sounds feel loud. At first, you love it, because for the first time in a very long time, you can actually feel your own inner peace again. Something you couldn't hear while living inside constant noise. But have you noticed something strange? If you stay in that quiet place long enough, maybe a few days, maybe a week, a part of you starts missing the highway. Not because the noise was good for you, but because it was familiar. That's exactly how the mind works. It will always try to return to what it recognizes, even when that thing exhausted you. And the moment something unfamiliar appears, peace, slowness, silence, the nervous system sounds an alarm. Something feels off here. This can't be safe. This is what healing feels like at the beginning. But if you stay committed to the process, if you remain long enough in that quieter place within yourself, something slowly changes. The silence stops feeling empty. It starts feeling like home. And one day, you realize something difficult. Some people in your life were the highway. Constant noise, constant urgency, constant emotional traffic. And because you have discovered a sense of great peace inside your own heart, you no longer crave that level of chaos. You just want a little more silence. But here's the part that surprised me when I first learned this. It's not just the loud people who drift away. It's sometimes the people you love most. Let me explain why. Imagine someone named Maya. Maya and her best friend Priya had been close for 11 years. The kind of close where they texted at 2 a.m., where they could call each other crying without explaining why. But their friendship had a certain rhythm to it, an unhealthy one. When Priya was anxious, Maya would drop everything. When Maya was overwhelmed, Priya would spiral with her, not to help, but because shared panic felt like closeness. They held each other's storms. Then Maya started therapy. Not dramatically, just quietly working on herself. She started setting small boundaries. She stopped texting at 2 a.m. She stopped co-spiraling. She started saying, "That sounds really hard. What do you think you'll do?" Instead of, "Oh my God, that's awful. I can't believe this is happening." And Priya got colder. Not in one big fight, just shorter responses, fewer invitations, a growing distance that neither of them knew how to name. Maya thought she'd done something wrong. What actually happened was this. The function Maya had served in that friendship changed, and the friendship, as it was structured, couldn't survive that change. Now, I'm not telling you that Priya was a bad friend. She wasn't. She was doing what she knew how to do. I'm telling you this because Maya's experience is the most common thing I hear from people who are genuinely, actively healing. The loneliness doesn't come from doing something wrong. It comes from outgrowing a shared coping style. And that is a grief worth naming. There's actually a name for what happens in relationships when one person changes. Psychologists call it interpersonal recalibration. Every relationship, every single one, has an invisible contract. Not written down anywhere, but deeply understood by both people. You be this, I'll be that. You stay here, I'll stay here. We do things this way. When you start healing, you start renegotiating your side of that contract. And most people don't know how to respond to that because no one told them the contract was being renegotiated. You just changed. And it felt, to them, like a betrayal. Here's the statistic that floored me when I came across it. Psychological observation on interpersonal relationships and personal growth suggests that roughly 70% of significant personal change, the kind that comes from therapy, recovery, or major life shifts, involves at least one meaningful relationship ending or drastically changing. 70%. That means if you are genuinely changing, statistically, you are supposed to feel some relational turbulence. It's not a sign you're doing it wrong. It's a marker that you're doing it deeply. There's a concept in behavioral psychology called the regression pull. When we make changes, even positive ones, our nervous system has something called a homeostatic response. Homeostasis just means returning to baseline. Your body does it with temperature. Your relationships do it with behavior. When you start acting differently, your nervous system and the nervous systems of people around you all start working to pull things back to familiar, even if familiar was painful. Even if familiar was exactly what you were trying to leave. The pullback isn't weakness, it's biology. So if you've tried to change something in your life, a boundary, a habit, a relationship dynamic, and you lasted 3 days and then slipped back into old patterns, you're not broken. You just ran into the regression pull without knowing what it was. Now you know what it is. And naming it gives you just a little more space to observe the pull instead of following it automatically. That space is where choice lives. I want to be clear about something. I'm not saying loneliness is fine, or easy, or that you should just sit in it. The loneliness that comes from healing is real. It hurts, and there's no shortcut through it. But there's something different about this loneliness. Normal loneliness is a signal that something is missing. Healing loneliness is a signal that something is shifting. One is contraction. The other is expansion in disguise. Think of it like this. When you leave a job you hated, there's always a moment after you quit where you miss your desk. Not the job, the desk, the routine, the familiar. That's not nostalgia telling you to go back. That's your nervous system processing loss before it can process freedom. Here's the question I want you to hold for a second. Who were you before the noise became normal? Not who you're supposed to be, not who other people need you to be, but the version of you that existed before you learned that calm was dangerous, or that taking up space made people uncomfortable, or that your peace came at the cost of someone else's approval. That person is still in there. They're just surfacing. And the loneliness you feel right now is the distance between who you were performing for and who you actually are. That distance is uncomfortable, but it is also exactly the right size. There's a moment a lot of people describe about 6 to 12 months into real, sustained healing. It doesn't come dramatically. It comes quietly. You're sitting somewhere, maybe a cafe, maybe your car, and you realize you're not waiting for anything. Not waiting for a text back, not waiting for someone to be less angry, not waiting for the conversation to shift to something safer. You're just sitting. And it doesn't feel empty. It feels like the first full breath you've taken in a very long time. This is the payoff that nobody posts about because it doesn't photograph well. It's not a vacation. It's not a promotion. It's not a grand reconciliation with someone who hurt you. It's a Tuesday afternoon where you feel okay in your own skin and you didn't need anyone's permission to get there. That moment is coming. If you're in the lonely part right now, the part where things are quieter than you expected, where certain friendships feel strange, where your family doesn't quite recognize who you're becoming, that moment is coming. And it will be worth exactly what it cost you to get there. So, practically, what do you do when you're in the middle of this? First, name the transition, not the loss. When a friendship fades or a dynamic shifts, our instinct is to frame it as failure. I lost this person. I broke something. Try reframing it. This relationship couldn't follow me here. That's not cold, that's accurate. And accurate language creates clearer thinking. Second, find one person who can meet you where you are now. Not 10, one. One person. A friend, a therapist, a community, a stranger on the internet, who understands that growth can be uncomfortable and doesn't need you to shrink back to make them comfortable. One person is enough to anchor you while the rest of the landscape shifts. Third, stop expecting your healing to be linear. Here's what nobody in the wellness space will tell you because it doesn't sell supplements. Some weeks, you will feel like you've gone backward. You'll snap at someone. You'll cancel your own boundaries. You'll send the text you shouldn't have sent. That's not failure. That's a Tuesday. Healing isn't a straight line. It's more like learning to drive. You don't go from never driven to smooth highway overnight. You stall. You brake too hard. You take a wrong turn. But you keep driving. And eventually, muscle memory takes over. So let me leave you with this. If you're healing right now, if you've been doing the work, quietly, without much applause, and it feels lonelier than you expected, you are not doing it wrong. You're doing something most people never attempt. You are choosing to grow beyond the version of yourself that learned to survive in painful environments. That growth creates distance. It creates silence. It creates rooms that used to be full of noise and are now just still. And that stillness feels strange at first, because you've never been allowed to just be without performing. But stay in it. Let it be unfamiliar, because on the other side of that unfamiliarity is a life that is genuinely, quietly yours. One last thing. If this video found you at the right moment, share it with one person you think might need it. Not 100 people, just one. Someone who might be in the lonely part of their own growth right now and doesn't have the words for why. This might be those words for them. And if you're new here, subscribe, because this channel is for people who want to understand themselves with a little more honesty and a little more grace. I'll see you in the next one.